Documentary, conspiracy theories, sarcasm and beer. It's a conversation, start listening, cause we're all here. Bobby Pickles Podcast.
That's me! Thank you for tuning in to episode 11 of the Bobby Pickles Podcast. On this episode, I'm speaking with Dr. John Boik. Dr. Boik is the founder of the Principled Societies Project, which is a science-based effort to design and test pioneering systems that improve well-being and speed the transition to sustainable society. He is also the president and founder of Earth BioMed, a 501c3 nonprofit cancer research organization, which is working to discover a new generation of safe anti-cancer therapies based on mixtures of plant products. Dr. Boik received a Bachelor's of Science degree in Civil Engineering from the University of Colorado, Boulder, and a Ph.D. in Biomedical Sciences from the University of Texas Health Sciences Center, Houston. He also completed postdoctoral work at Stanford University, and he has written a new book entitled Creating Sustainable Societies, The Rebirth of Democracy and Local Economies, his first book outside the field of biomedical research. Dr. Boik, thank you for being on the Bobby Pickles Podcast.
Call me John.
John.
Yes,
John,
there we go.
Thank you for being on. I really appreciate it. So we hear all the time, global economies, the New World Order, globalization, one world government. It seems like economies are globalizing. And what you're supposing is the polar opposite of the way various pundits and politicians feel our country, our world is heading. Why the contrarian viewpoint?
Well, the reason for globalization, the reason for any economic activity really, is in one way or another to increase the well-being of citizens. It's globalization, global trade certainly has a variety of benefits. It also has a variety of drawbacks. But little focus is actually given to building local economies, self-reliant local economies, strong local economies, and much more could be done on that level to the degree that residents of a community, of an urban area, focus on supporting local businesses, investing in local businesses. There's actually an enormous potential to increase the benefits to the community and the well-being of the community. So I'm entering into an area that has received actually too little attention in the news. And one of the reasons perhaps that it's not received as much attention is because at the local level, we're talking more small businesses, for example, small and medium-sized businesses. And they simply don't have the clout that large multinational corporations have. So the large multinational corporations, with their cash reserves and ability to influence national dialogues, have a great influence over the news headlines. On the opposite side, at the local level, there simply isn't those resources. So the building local economies just simply doesn't get the same attention.
Right. Actually, what I was saying, that I feel like the world's heading in a different global kind of economy, and it's kind of a contrarian viewpoint. But now just pondering about it and thinking about it, actually, I feel like it does make sense, though. Don't you think? I mean, with the advent of the internet and whatnot.
Sure, it makes a lot of sense to me because
just look at this podcast, for instance, John.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, at any time, anybody can now be heard, right?
That's right.
If you have the wherewithal. And what do you think that eventually every single person will have their own thing that they can offer and they can just be self-sustaining?
I'm not quite sure what you mean by the question.
Just anybody could go into business for themselves. Anybody can offer some kind of,
Yeah, in that sense, I mean, that's what supporting the small business community really means. I mean, a small business includes a business where it's a one-person business, a sole proprietorship. So by supporting small businesses, you generally support local businesses and support a diverse set of businesses. That's much different, say, than investing in IBM or large multinational corporations. Investing in local businesses and patronizing local businesses can actually have a huge effect on the health of a local economy. The variety of other reasons, too, why one might want to support local economies as opposed to the globalization, global trade. For example, at the local level, citizens of a community have a much better idea of how products are produced, how the industries treat workers, what the community needs are, And by working at the local level, all of that can be much more easily addressed than, say, working at the global level. For example, you might invest your money in a company that has a manufacturing shop in the Philippines, for example, and that's a long way away. You don't really know how that company is treating its workers, for example. But if you invested in the same company that was local or a similar company that was local, you might have a much better idea of how workers are being treated and how the company is treating the environment and so on and so forth.
On your website, you discussed systems thinking. Can you go into that for me?
Sure. My interest in biology was always in systems thinking, and I worked in cancer biology. So, for example, some of my colleagues were experts on one particular protein in a cancer cell. My interest was always in looking at the symphony of proteins within a cancer cell and trying to understand how they all interact in order to make it do what it does. By the same token, when I turn my sights outward into the larger financial economic world, I tried to understand how it is that the systems all interact to make our economy what it is. And in doing so, I realized that, it's probably obvious to a lot of people today that there's a great deal of either dysfunction or at least incapacity to take advantage of all the opportunities that actually exist. There is so much room for improvement in our economy. For example, right now, 1/3 of all Americans are living in poverty or in the working poor level just above it. That's an enormous percentage of the population that is extremely disadvantaged. There's so many opportunities.
Why do you think that is?
Why do I think that is?
Yeah, that 1/3 of this great country where we have so much wealth and we're like the richest country in the world, 1/3 of our citizens are the working poor.
Right.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think there's a variety of reasons for that, actually. One is that looking at the big picture, our entire financial and economic systems are not really designed to improve well-being. That's not necessarily how they work. Our financial system and economic systems, they operate primarily on the profit motive. And the thinking, the general thinking is that if the GDP goes up, if factories produce more goods, somehow that brings everybody a better life. But that's not really necessarily true. And we can look at the statistics and say that doesn't really work very well. Our current systems don't bring a better life for everybody. In fact, as we just mentioned, 1/3 of the country is kind of barely hanging on. So the structures of our financial and economic systems simply don't support what it is that we actually want. What we actually want is well-being. And when I say well-being, I mean that in the kind of the greatest sense in the largest sense of the word. I mean that we want to be secure. We need to have enough food and shelter and all the necessities like that. But on top of that, we want to enjoy our lives. We want to have strong communities. We want to have time for recreation. Even at work, for example, we want to build our reputation with our peers. We want to be helpful. We want our jobs to be meaningful. We want to participate in some meaningful way in the larger society and enjoy ourselves while we do it. And the structures of our economy are not really geared to specifically deliver that. They might be geared to increase the GDP, but increasing the GDP does not necessarily bring the things that I just was listing.
Aren't we really like indentured servants?
I think probably millions of Americans feel like they're on a grind where there's some type of indentured servant.
You don't feel like you're an indentured servant, though. You're doing what you want to do, right?
Yeah, I'm doing what I want to do. It's true, but my job would be a lot easier. My efforts would be a lot easier under a financial and economic system that supported ingenuity and creativity in new ways than it does today. For example, I run a nonprofit, the Earth BioMed. It's not easy to find funding to run a nonprofit. It's very, very difficult. In the book that I wrote, Creating Sustainable Societies, I talk about the potential of developing a new financial system, new monetary, I call it a monetary/financial system at the local level. In essence, would inject currency into a local economy. and also would direct that currency towards projects that best serve the common good, the public good. And if that were true, if this system, were functioning properly and were set up in a reasonable sized cities, not only would local businesses benefit, but nonprofits and schools and public services and all of those sorts of operations too would benefit.
So when you say local currencies, do you mean like literally notes, like legal tender that people have on the local level? There won't be any.
Yeah, there's actually a variety of types of local currencies available.
Are you talking about like barter and trade and all these other things?
Yeah, that is one aspect of them. For example, there are business-to-business barter systems that have actually been around and are fairly successful. Thousands of businesses participate in business-to-business barter type operations or mutual credit type operations. There's also the kind of what some people call the community currency concept, where, for example, in the Berkshires region of Massachusetts, they have a currency I think it's called the Berkshire Bucks. And you purchase that currency using dollars. And then the currency you purchase, the local currency, which I believe it comes in various denominations of paper bills, can only be used at local participating stores. And that's one result of a currency like that, is it keeps money circulating longer in the local community, which then is beneficial to all the businesses that are participating.
Is there any downside to local currencies that you've seen?
Well, it depends on how the currency is structured. I've just named a couple of them. The proposal that I make in my book is what I would term a more advanced type of local currency. As far as downsides go, that's a little hard to say because the currency systems that are in existence, none of them are really large. In a sense, you could say that they haven't had the full scientific examination and analysis done on them. Many of the local currency systems are quite small, perhaps 1,000 participants or less, and to the degree that they've not become millions of participants suggests that there's still work to be done, either to promote them or to improve their design or something like that. So all of the systems in existence right now are fairly small, although that is starting to change. For example, in the UK, there was in the news recently, there's been a great amount of attention paid to the town of Bristol that has now produced its own currency called the Bristol Pound, I believe. And even local businesses can even pay their business taxes, using this currency. And I believe I read that the mayor was going to accept either all or a good chunk of his salary in the local currency. So as initiatives like this get rolling, it could well be that within a few years, 5 years or 6 or 7 or 10 years, that many thousands of people within a local community are participating in these kinds of things.
It sounds like a great idea to me, but do you think the bankers would allow that, though?
It's not really a question of will bankers allow it or not, because they really can't. It's perfectly legal. These currency systems are perfectly legal. So the fact that a banker might not like it doesn't really
What are the
matter.
currency systems backed by? It's just trade for the dollar, right? Trade for the U.S. dollar.
Well, one of the types of currencies that I mentioned to you, for example, the Berkshires system and also the Bristol system, you actually do take the national currency, the dollar in America, and then purchase the local currency using that. So in that sense, they're kind of like coupons, you might say, or vouchers. But the system that I'm developing and some of the other systems are not like that at all. For example, the system I'm developing is created by a community association. Anyone who wants to participate joins this community association. The community association is democratically governed. And this association issues currency by fiat, that is debt-free currency, then injects that into the local economy. So and that's the system I'm proposing is not the kind that you purchase using the dollar. Actually creates new currency and injects it into a local economy. And the potential for that actually is great. I mean, again, all the systems in existence today are quite small, but the possibility exists that perhaps in a community, it's a little hard to say, but perhaps 30% or more of commerce could occur using a local currency if it was well designed. And in a large city, that could mean, the potential of hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars worth of local currency circulating in a community.
But don't you think that'd be messy though, if you're like going from, you're going from Texas and you're going to go to New York for vacation or something like that?
Now you could say that that's one drawback of a local currency, in the sense that it's really designed for local use. I mean, it's both a drawback and a benefit. The idea really is to help local communities become more self-sufficient, more reliant, boost their economies, support, the development of new businesses, particularly green businesses. And so the fact that they're local is both a benefit and a liability. It's true that, depending on what kind of system you're talking about, even say, for example, the Berkshire Buck system, you can take your local coupons, your local bills, and then trade them back into dollars if you wish. So in that sense, you're not limited, although you do pay a little bit of a penalty, I believe, if you do so.
And then also I could foresee, like, how people trade currency right now. They trade euros and whatnot and stuff in the stock market. So
right.
would that open up some kind of crazy trading scheme going on?
For some currencies that might be the case, and some currencies are actually designed with that in mind, that they could be freely traded on eBay, for example. Mm-hmm. The system that I'm working on is not like that. It's not designed to be traded for dollars or for any other currency. It's, in a sense, it has a bit of a firewall around it. But depending on the currency system, some would be like that, where people could be trading them.
Can you shed some light on something for me? Because I was under the impression that a fiat currency was something that's not backed by any real money, like no silver or no gold or anything like that.
You mean not backed by any commodity? And that's correct, yeah.
Right.
At one time in the United States...
Isn't there a distinction, though, John, between money and currency?
No. You
okay.
could... No, a currency can be backed by various things. Traditionally, currencies were backed by commodities such as gold or silver or other precious metals.
This helped kind of balance everything, because we couldn't borrow more money than we had the commodities in the bank, right?
Well, actually, it doesn't really work very well for a modern economy to base its currency on a commodity such as gold. In any economic system, whether it's based on gold or whether it's based on any other thing, the ultimate base of a currency system is the people and their faith in one another, and their faith in their monetary and economic system, and their willingness to participate in that system. Every system ultimately is based on community faith and trust. Even gold. For example, the price of gold fluctuates widely. Let me give you one historic example of that. I hope I don't have my dates wrong here, but it might have been perhaps in the 1400s or so. Spain had sent a bunch of explorers to North and South America. They brought back, particularly from Peru and areas like that, they brought back a huge amount of gold and injected it into the economy in Spain. And when that first started, everyone there thought, this is going to be great. We're going to get wealthy beyond belief. But one of the effects of that, by injecting all that new gold into their economy, was simply inflation. Not double-digit inflation, but a noticeable inflation occurred. And the point of that is that
inflation can happen with anything. It does.
Yeah. Inflation can happen with anything.
If you have too much of the commodity or too much of the currency.
That's right. And there's other problems with basing a currency system on gold too. For example, if you do that, then countries who have gold mines have a huge advantage over countries that don't, because they can create new currency, and countries that don't have gold mines can't. So that's one thing. Another is
that's why we need to get to space, John. We need to get to space and find a moon that is.
Yeah, there you go. Well, this is what the problem is. So suppose you go to the moon and you find hoards of gold and you bring it back. Well, that just causes inflation. Yeah, so that doesn't really help. Another problem with backing a currency on the gold or another commodity is that it can't really respond to the needs of a growing or contracting economy. Economies are viable, living, dynamic entities, and at times they need to expand, at times they need to contract, and you can't really do that if you have an economy, or you can't do it well with an economy based on a commodity like gold. I mean, the supply of gold doesn't expand and contract at the same time that your economy needs to.
So you support Nixon's decision in 1971 to end the gold standard.
Fiat currency is essentially the only kind of currency that makes sense. And again, I want to emphasize this, that every currency, even a gold currency, ultimately is based on the faith of people in one another, in their contracts, in their word, and in their systems. Ultimately, every currency is based on the faith of a community, the trust of a community in itself and in its commitments. So a fiat currency is simply being true to what is actually the case. One of the difficulties that people have with a fiat currency is they think then that, that governments can't be trusted and therefore a fiat currency ultimately will lose its value or something like that. So that's not an argument against fiat currencies because, like I said, every currency ultimately is based on the faith of people in themselves and in their commitments. What that really means is we need to develop better fiat currencies and higher degrees of democracy and better oversight and more transparency. I mean, there's enormous room to improve financial systems and monetary systems, and that's what I'm trying to do in the proposal in my book. But it's not a reason to switch to actually a gold-based, commodity-based currency.
On your website, in your book, you discuss principled business model. Let's talk about that.
Sure. Okay, so let me give a little background for that first. So the proposal in the book, I call it the Principled Societies Framework, there's three legs to it that it stands on. One is the currency system itself, which I call tokens. It's an electronic currency. And part of the token system, it's both a monetary and a financial system. So it's a monetary system in the sense that it creates currency for a local economy. And it's a financial system in the sense that there's a formal way to direct that currency towards funding businesses, funding schools, nonprofits, public services, and essentially funding those things that the public actually needs. So that's one leg, the currency system itself. The second leg is a new corporate model, which I call a principled business model, which you've mentioned. And then the third leg is a governance system that allows participants, in the system to govern, to essentially to make their rules and to govern it the way they need to govern it. I won't say much about the governance system other than to say it's based on direct democracy. So in this governance system, the people who participate really do self-govern in a very direct way. Everyone has an opportunity to have their voice heard, and decisions are made through a direct democracy, as opposed to, say, a representative democracy. A community association, which I call a principled society, everyone who wants to participate would join this community association, and then the community association would issue the currency and govern itself through this direct democracy online model.
This really sounds like an intriguing, very interesting thing that you're supposing here.
Thanks. I'm quite interested in it.
I like it. I want to start a principled society right now. I wish we had these. What should somebody do?
Let me just touch on that for a minute. It's not actually quite ready for implementation yet.
When will it be ready?
It's a big deal. It's going to take several more years to develop, and probably several $1 million to develop too. So I'm looking for funding as we go. And the first implementation will be in a science-based pilot trial in one willing host city. And then, through the pilot trial, we'll work out some of the bugs and demonstrate the utility and usefulness of the system. And after that point, then it should be ready to go, and the software should be available for free, actually, to anybody, any group, any community that wants to start this. But we're still talking several years down the road before it's ready to, roll off the assembly line.
If you were going to pick one city in the U.S. to use as the example city, what would it be, you think?
Oh, that decision will be made down the road, and
I know. But just going off of now, okay, if you could just, you've been around the country somewhat, right? You've experienced different cities. What do you think would be the best city that would be able to use this as an example?
Yeah, that's actually a really hard question to answer because almost any city, this would work in almost any city. So, for example,
but you'd have to have really forward-thinking, very liberal-minded people probably to try this out.
You know, maybe in the sense that it's a pilot trial and you need some degree of adventurous spirit or some degree of real need. You know, that drives things too. So let's take a city like Detroit, for example.
I knew you'd say Detroit when you were saying that about they really need it.
Well, you're psychic then, or something. So take a city like Detroit. You know, their economy is not doing well. There would be potentially a lot of interest in a system that would bring new currency into their local economy. So perhaps they would be interested. But by the same token, really any city in the USA, even New York City or Los Angeles or a smaller city like Des Moines, Iowa, the pilot trial could work in practically any city. By the way, you had mentioned something a moment ago about kind of progressive ideals and stuff. It's true, perhaps, that might be important just at the very beginning, just to kind of prove the demonstration project, to conduct the demonstration project. But once that's completed, this is really more of a business sense kind of thing. I've tried my best to design this such that both the individual participants and the businesses that participate and the schools that participate and the nonprofits that participate, everyone should come out both socially and financially ahead through participation. That's the whole idea of this.
How did you ever start thinking about this with your biomedical background and whatnot? This is a little, I know it's not a complete stretch because you're applying the different science, the ways you think about science to this.
Right, I'm very much bringing a scientific perspective to this. But, actually what started this whole process for me was the fact that I ran this nonprofit cancer research organization. And I was a couple of years ago, I was looking for new funding avenues. And I was just thinking, where is the money in this nation? I mean, how does one reach the money that's available in this nation? How do nonprofits find new sources of funding? And that actually was the impetus that got the ball rolling. And then once I started to think about that, through a process, I started to look at our larger financial and economic systems and then realized that, there's just an enormous amount of improvement that could be made.
Were you able to find some good funding?
No, because once I started to think about these things, it sort of took over my life. So my attention has really moved from working on the nonprofit towards working on this project. But if any of your audience wants to fund the cancer research group, that's I sure don't want to discourage that.
Go to principledsocietiesproject.org.
The new website is called principledsocietiesproject.org, right? The other website is called earthbiomed.org.
Going back to the cancer research thing, so while I was listing your background and your education during the intro, I failed to mention that you've also received a master's degree in Oriental Medicine from Oregon College of Oriental Medicine in Portland.
Yeah, I have an eclectic background.
You do have an eclectic background, but why don't you mention that on your most recent websites and projects? Is it because many Americans hear the term Oriental Medicine and they easily dismiss it, or?
There's not a big reason for that. I mean, I sometimes I mention it and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I don't want to use up too many words. Depending on where the bio is going to be used, for example.
Yeah, because I also read that you operated an acupuncture clinic for.
I did at one point. Yeah.
How did that experience shape your work?
That was actually what got me into cancer research. At one point, I became interested in Chinese herbal medicine, which I think to this day is just fascinating. It's a fascinating field, a fascinating history, and in Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, they have an amazing, almost poetic and I would say deeply profound way of looking at the body and looking at health and disease. It was very enlightening to me and very useful to me, and very interesting to me on many levels. And that's really what got me interested in cancer research. I started to look at a few articles on how various Chinese herbs have been used to assist cancer patients. And then that led eventually to me writing a couple of books on that topic, and then eventually getting my Ph.D. in cancer research.
So this is a topic that I hold dear to me because my mother, she has breast cancer. And Are there any plant-based alternative therapies that like she should consider?
Yeah, that would be a hard thing for me to just say off.
Just off the cuff?
Yeah, off the cuff. I have to really say that early on I was involved in clinical work through acupuncture and working with patients, but that was well over a decade ago, and ever since then I've really been involved in basic science.
Right. So you had that background. You did have an interest in it, but that was then, and then.
I don't mean to say I don't have an interest. I still do, but my time and attention now is really focused on this, looking at the larger health. I mean, it's in a sense, I'm still looking at the health, only now it's the health of society rather than the health of a particular patient.
One more thing about the cancer stuff. What
Sure.
about Steve Jobs? You know, there have been a lot of reports that he delayed his traditional cancer treatments for up to 9 months to undergo alternative holistic cancer treatments, such as the changing of his diet, acupuncture, etc. What are your thoughts on that, though? Like, he was very vocal about that he should have gone with the traditional route sooner.
You know, I really hesitate to weigh in on that because I didn't follow the story and don't know what the circumstances were, so I can't really say much about that.
Okay, how about Andrew Weil? Do you know who that guy is?
Yeah, I do. Mm-hmm.
I don't really know about that gentleman that much. Is he kind of a quack, or does he have some legitimate stuff that he talks about?
Well, I'm not an expert on Andrew Weil either, but I think that he says some very interesting things. He has a lot of background. He has background both as a MD and also in various types of complementary medicines. He's a very, very intelligent human being. That's about all I can say on that.
Why do you think...
I did. By the way, I did talk to him on the phone one day, a long time ago when I was still in my clinic, my acupuncture clinic, and I had some questions, and I called him up, and I was surprised. He was kind enough to call me back, and we chatted on the phone for a little bit. I tipped my hat to him for that.
Why is there so much pushback towards alternative ways to deal with these sort of things?
Yeah, I'll just share a few thoughts I have on that. One is that there's much more receptivity to complementary therapies, you know, eating a good diet. There's much more receptivity to that kind of stuff today than there was when I started 15 years ago or so. But why do people resist change? Well, you know, there's a variety of reasons for that. Advertising influences people, national conversations influence people, and not all voices are necessarily heard in national conversations. So someone hears about a new therapy, for example, it's not been proven in any clinical trial, and there's some good reasons to be apprehensive and to study something thoroughly before you make a decision on what might be best for you. And a lot of people are, you know, either they don't have time to really look into it deeply enough, or you know, for a variety of reasons, they are resistant to change. But to some degree, that applies to and even on the idea of local currencies. Local currencies are a new concept. I mean, I shouldn't say new because they've been around for a long time in various forms, but to the whole of society, they're not exactly on the front page news every day. And there's great potential for local currencies to improve local economies, to create green jobs, to reduce unemployment, to fund schools, nonprofits, public services. And there's a bit of development that still needs to occur to improve systems. And then also there's a good deal of promotion that needs to occur just to simply tell people that there are new alternatives and complements that are being developed. In fact, that's why I'm on your show, just to kind of talk about this publicly and let people know that these things exist.
So right now, basically, I mean, where are you with your current project? You have two dual projects right now. You have the Principled Societies project, setting up a local economy to sustain, but also you do the cancer treatment as well, right?
Really, I would say 100% of my time now is on the Principled Societies project.
Why is it like that? Was it just not going anywhere with the cancer research stuff, or?
Oh, no, I will always be interested in that field. It's a very fascinating field to me. The funding of my nonprofit wasn't able to receive the funding that it needed to really expand. And at the same time, my interest turned towards the larger society to see what I could do to improve the health of the larger society. Right. For example, think about a patient for a moment, a cancer patient or some other kind of patient, any human being. They don't end at their skin, really. I mean, we think of people as individuals, but indeed we interact with the larger society. Our health depends on the larger society in so many ways. The businesses that are formed influence what types of food that we receive. Advertisements on TV influence what types of foods we eat. The health of our interactions with one another and with our communities influence our physical health. And for me, it was actually kind of a logical extension to move past the individual and look at the health of society.
Yeah, no, I see that. When you were talking before, we talked a little bit about the principal business model, and I just noticed another thing on your website. My company, for instance, I make T-shirts and I do the podcast under a corporation entitled Fat Enzo Incorporated. It's a C corporation. What's a B corporation? Is that a relatively new classification?
Yeah, that's a good question. The principal business model borrows from several other models that are in existence. In the last number of years, 5, 6, 7, 8 years or whatever, several new models have been developed that are what I would say are dual-purpose corporate models. They're dual-purpose in the sense that within their legal structure is the directive to both make a profit as normal, but also to fulfill a social mission. And several states now have on their books the ability to start these types of corporations. One of them is called a B corporation or a benefit corporation. Another is called a L3C. And there's several other ones that are still in development or have recently been put on books in various states. So these dual purpose corporations, that's a new corporate model. It's really a large step in the evolution of corporate models. Another model that I borrowed from is the nonprofit model, which of course has been around for a long time. And yet another model that I've borrowed from is called the social business model, developed by Muhammad Yunus, who you may have heard the name, but he received the Nobel Peace Prize some years back for his work with microcredit in Pakistan and other countries. So I've taken, in some ways, the best of all of these models and then added to them some other enhancements and developed what I call this principal business model. It's unique and it's intended to thrive in a dollar token economy. And I call it a community-centric business model in the sense that there's a deep relationship between the consumers in a urban area that support the business and the business itself, which then produces goods and products for the consumer. So it's really what I would say, a community-centric corporate model, a new step forward in building corporate models and in corporations that really serve the community in a straight and meaningful way.
Right. When you talk about collaborative governance.
Yes.
Your website, you state that Principled Society is a local volunteer membership club that implements and tests new systems. What does someone have to do to volunteer?
Like, how would one participate in this? There would be various levels of participation. One, at a very basic level, one would simply receive tokens either as part of their paycheck from their employer, or if they owned a business, perhaps they would, if you owned a bakery, for example, maybe you would accept tokens in your bakery as in partial payment for the goods that you sell. So I would say that's probably the most basic level, where you receive tokens through your work or through sales, and you then spend them as you would dollars in the local community. You take your tokens and then you buy a shirt with them or other items. So that would be the simplest, and then there would be other deeper ways to get involved too. One thing I do want to mention that's somewhat unique to this system is that some of the tokens that you would receive, there's a crowdfunding operation that funds local businesses with interest-free loans. So local businesses that wish to receive loans would come to the Principled Society and say, I'd like to participate and I'd like to receive an interest-free loan and tokens. And then all the participants in the system, they would have to use a small percentage of their incoming tokens as interest-free loans for those businesses who apply for them. So in this way, everyone who participates becomes a member of the investment class. And in a sense, investment decisions then are more democratic and more decentralized. In our current financial system, bankers and primarily wealthy investors make the bulk of the investment decisions for us. But the decisions they make are not necessarily the ones that are best for our communities. Generally, investors will make decisions based on what businesses they think will profit them the most at the least risk. And while that works to some degree, they don't necessarily fund those businesses and those projects that could bring the greatest benefit to a community. And this system that I'm developing allows everyone to participate in creating the kind of projects and business environment that they really want.
How can there be no interest?
The token currency itself is designed to be interest-free. And I didn't mean interest-free, I meant inflation-free. So inflation is a big...
Inflation-free, okay.
Yeah. Inflation is a big topic. And I will say that our current financial system, the dollar, the monetary system uses inflation for certain purposes. For example, if there's no inflation and you have if you have dollars in a jar at home, you can bury them in the ground and dig them up in 10 years. Say you put $10 in the jar, you dig it up in 10 years, and you'll still have $10 in the jar. Those dollars will be worth the same amount if there was no inflation. But that doesn't really encourage you to take that money out of the jar and put it into a bank where it then can be used to make loans to businesses and can participate in the larger economy. So our current financial and monetary systems actually use inflation in a few different ways to keep money in circulation. You know, the fact that we will lose it if we don't use it is a bit of an encouragement for us to not just keep money sitting home in a jar. So that works to a degree, but obviously inflation can be a problem. And if it gets out of hand, it can be a huge problem. For example, one of the problems that it causes is if you're a saver, well, then you don't benefit from inflation. It slowly eats away your savings, unless they're invested in some way. So the token system that I'm developing is actually designed to be inflation-free. So if it works properly, a token that will hold its value over time and won't inflate. In this system, inflation is not really necessary. It's not necessary to drive business investment or individual savings. There's other ways that a savings and investment are driven. So inflation really does not need to be present in the token system, and indeed, it's designed so that there is no inflation. So that's kind of where the interest-free loans come from too. That's kind of a related topic. Again, in this token system, investment occurs through a profit-neutral mechanism, a profit-neutral crowdfunding mechanism. So interest-free loans are given to local businesses that apply for them, which of course is great for the local businesses because that's a relatively inexpensive source of funding for them. And that should boost economic activity in a local economy. Of course, the question becomes then, how does someone get wealthy in this system? How do they save for a rainy day, for example?
Yeah, that's what I want to know. How would somebody amass a large fortune in this system?
Yeah, so those are two slightly different questions. How do you amass a large fortune, and how do you save for a rainy day? Those are two slightly different
because,
questions.
John, sorry, but what we were talking about before as far as well-being, right?
Right.
What it really comes down to is somebody's well-being. Like, they just want enough money in order to have a decent life and care for themselves and whatnot, right?
Right. So this is really important. Earlier we were talking about what if we went to the moon, brought back a bunch of gold, and we would think we'd be rich, but we brought it back and it mostly just causes inflation. Right. That's a really important concept for people to understand because the fact is that we can't all be rich. That's impossible. We cannot all be rich. We can't all be Bill Gates. That's never going to happen. If we were all Bill Gates, a dollar would be worth a fraction of what it's worth today. If everyone was billionaires, dollars wouldn't be worth much. So the fact is that the average wage, the average income, can only expand to a certain level. And if it expands past that, if the Fed were to inject tons of money into the economy and everybody suddenly was making $800,000 a year, there would be runaway inflation, and it wouldn't really do anybody good. It would actually do the economy more harm. So if we understand that, there actually is a limit to what the average income can be, then we can put our attention where it really belongs, on enhancing well-being. Sharing the economic pie is much more important than individuals, struggling to obtain high wealth, because that's a futile attempt. For the vast majority of Americans, it's futile to try to attain high wealth. It's much more reasonable, however. Easily 80% of the population or more would greatly benefit if we simply shared the wealth that is here more evenly, if incomes were more even.
Share the wealth, Huey Long.
Yes. Share the wealth. Now, I want to, for those listeners who hear that phrase and suddenly the hair stands up on their necks, I want to say that in no way am I recommending that we somehow take someone's wealth away and then redistribute it to everyone. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about building a local monetary and financial system that by itself, naturally, over time, tends to produce incomes that are somewhat equal, or not, at least not grossly unequal. And then over time, that would have an effect. Over time, that would tend to even out people's incomes quite a bit more than they are today. I also want to say that compared to the rest of the world, the wealth and income disparities in America are huge. We have greater wealth and income disparities than any other developed nation in the world. On the CIA rankings that I was looking at, somewhere's near Jamaica and some other countries that as far as the inequities of wealth and income in our society. So that is a huge problem, and studies are now coming out suggesting that when there are such large wealth and income inequities, that actually hurts the economy more than helps it.
Right, but this is a free country, and we are free to go out and try to make as much money as we want and be entrepreneurs. And if we don't want to do that, then we end up poor, right?
That's one of the difficulties with our current financial and economic system. It's really focused on that whole strive for individual wealth. That's a huge motivator in this financial and economic system.
It motivates me.
And that's really unfortunate, because the average person would be much, much better off if we, instead of viewing a financial and economic system as a way to build individual wealth, if we viewed it as a way to build well-being for everybody, enormous changes would happen. We all would be much better off. We all would live more comfortable lives and happier lives, for that matter, in general.
Yeah, I feel like that's definitely a true statement. I mean, when I say that that kind of motivates me to be wealthy, really, do I really want to be wealthy, or do I just want well-being? I think I just want well-being.
Yeah. Money is just the intermediary. We don't want, we think that we want wealth, but what we really want is to be happy, to be in loving relationships, and certainly to have freedom so that we can, travel when we, want to take a trip, or have education, or have health care, or have, the basic goods and services that we need to, be creative and to have some recreation time. Those are all the things that matter. That's what matters. Well-being matters.
Yeah, like I heard somebody say very recently that money is like your blood. And if you don't have any blood, you don't have any life. And it's the same kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So what would somebody do if they were very driven and they just wanted to amass a lot of wealth, and they're in your system? Would these people even exist in your system?
Somebody like that might choose to either start a business or participate in the token economy, because, as I said earlier, the token economy is designed to boost local economies. So anyone who wants to participate in that would be welcome, and many kinds of people would want to participate in that. Probably lots of people would want to participate in that. Who would not want to participate in something that actually makes them better off? So, sure, there'd be all kinds of personalities that would want to participate. But the general tone of this is not focused on becoming rich in the sense of billionaires or something like that. It's really focused on building the health and well-being of the entire community. That's the end effect of participating. But people can participate for their own individual reasons, one of which might be to simply improve their own personal financial situation.
Very interesting. So if somebody is interested in your book, where do they go? What do they do?
Let me say that the book is available for free. I mean, you can buy it on Amazon too.
You're not in this whole thing to make money. You don't want to increase your well-being, John?
Everyone wants to increase their well-being, certainly.
We can't let this thing go the way of the cancer research, John. It has to. You have to make money somehow, right?
Oh, sure. I just have a different business model for this book. What I hope to achieve through the book is to bring the ideas out to the public, the concepts of what I've been talking about. And very soon here, I will be applying for grants to a number of foundations. And hopefully I will be able to obtain grants to continue my work in this field. So I do want to say the book is for sale on Amazon, but it's also available as a free PDF on the website. And the website is principledsocietiesproject.org. There's also a very pleasant and instructional animated video on the website. It's also on YouTube that people can watch, and it gives a nice overview of how the whole project works.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on. If anybody is interested in more of what Dr. John Boik has to say, please go check out his website, principledsocietiesproject.org. Thank you, John.
Great, my pleasure.
1, 2, 3. FatEnzo.com. 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 FatEnzo.com.